Welcome back to another episode of the Dynasty Dingers podcast. It is Sunday, February 16th. Doc is with me as well today, but we have a very special guest today from the MLB Data Warehouse. We have John Anderson. Before we welcome in John, Doc, what is going on?
Doing well, brother. You know, I got the guys cracking up, but I'm being dead serious. I started feeling a little bit ill the last couple of days, just no energy, just fighting it off. And but I guzzle back that raw milky straight from the. Okay, this is not tied in with my newborn child. Okay, I'm talking about like a raw. This is raw goat milk. I'm talking about cow milk. I'm not talking about human milk in this instance, folks. Not in this instance. And so I'm feeling better. I got my cigar. I'm back in the game. I'm ready to go. And we got John Anderson on here. He's putting his mark on the industry. A lot of people know and like to talk about him for better or for worse. And we think he's for better. We think he brings quite a bit of frankly, he's kind of a competition, a competition for our Scout the Stat Line model. But I believe he's got more of an emphasis on the MLB side of things. So maybe we can shake hands after all the blood spilled.
And we're in Indiana, so maybe we could actually do that someday. So
yes, we are both Hoosiers here. We got from different parts of it, but yeah, we'll have to meet up and have a cigar in person if this goes well. It's
for sure.
John Anderson and Doc, and then we got Matt Morris. He's going back to Wisconsin, so we'll have a whole Midwestern vibe here. He's in Las Vegas.
Yeah, I'm in Vegas now, but I guess we can bring this up as the first topic because I've always kind of found this weird. We have the East Coast fantasy community, right? Like, kind of talked about those guys before we jumped on today. There's actually a very, very big pocket in the Midwest that I don't think I realized until I worked my way into the industry. And I'm kind of curious if that baseball love is because you have that strong Midwestern like family dynamic, right? Like you go to the ballpark and you have that community element. East Coast makes sense too because there's that history and that lineage. On the West Coast, baseball's cool, but it's not loved like it is in the rest of the country. Do you feel like that's similar to where you are, John?
My dad hated baseball and he hated that I liked it. He told me it was all about money and that nothing was, that I should just focus on. He wanted me to be into cars and mechanics and stuff. And I was just like, I want to watch this Pirate game. So it didn't come from family for me, but sure. I mean, and then the bad weather too, like, I don't know, spring, there's maybe something to that every spring, like no matter if you like baseball or whatever, you're just like looking forward to that forever because winter is like sucks. It's so bad. And then maybe like coinciding with the beginning of spring is this baseball season starting. So I don't know. There's just not as much stuff to do here. And then you West Coasters are all on drugs and hippies and stuff. So maybe that plays in. I don't know, but sure. Yeah.
Yeah, drugs, nightclubs, the material possessions of life. That's definitely what I look at the West Coast as, and there's just not time for baseball. So that sucks for them.
Yeah.
All right, man. Let's get into a little bit of your backstory. We've in past episodes have gone way too long into this space. I don't think we're gonna, have that problem here. But Doc and I just kind of wanted to just get the history of how you got to where you did today. So kind of just walk us through those steps of why you dove into content, what was the main underlying motivation there, and then your path through that.
The motivation was the riches and fame and women of the fantasy baseball.
Yes.
Yeah. So that was pretty easy to answer.
Especially women.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I can't even go to the grocery store. Like, I want to say that I wanted to be on this podcast when I first hit one of your Twitter videos, Doc, and I saw you were outside smoking a cigar. Just like that, it was the funniest thing in the world to me. And I appreciate that you are very allegiant to that. Like it's just every time, so that's good. Especially, and then you have kids too. Like you're gonna go inside smelling like a chimney. I don't know how like you saw that off to your wife. That's pretty good.
Well, at the end of the day, it goes God, and then me, and then my wife has to listen to whatever I say.
And you're making all kinds of money. This podcast brings in all the money. So sure, what can she say?
Oh man, yeah, I'm set for life. This is generational wealth here on the Dynasty Dingers. I do wash my hands. I don't want to get the tobacco all over the kids
with the raw milk and so
Yes.
So I liked Excel when I was a kid for some reason. I was in middle school or something, and I had an HTML book. I was trying to teach myself HTML. I guess maybe to make my dad proud of me. Like he didn't care about my little league stats, so I wanted to, show him that I could do something on a computer. I'm just kidding about my dad. We have a very fine relationship. It's just a joke, but so then high school, we started fantasy baseball league. So I liked baseball and numbers, and me and my buddies all I lived in Pittsburgh until 5 years ago, so it was a Pirates thing. You couldn't really, the Pirates would last a couple months, and then you had to stop caring about them unless you were a psycho. Like I still know these adults that watch 155 Pirates games every year. It's like September, and they're still watching these Pirate games. It's like, do you guys like get a life? My God, what are you doing? So anyway, to kind of get around that, it's fantasy, right? Then you can more or less gamble, and then you can entertain yourself that way instead of trying to force yourself into rooting for a Pirates team that was 30 below 500. So then I started a league there, and then the motivation became like, my friends are idiots, and I'll just try to show that I'm smarter than them and then beat them at that. So that was fun. And also the money, like we played for $10 in high school and college, but you would win. I won a lot most of the time, because unlike fantasy football, fantasy baseball is actually kind of a skill thing. You can, like, the better player will win, not every time, but much more often. So I would hit that like $80 payday at the end of every summer and be like, holy cow, how much Mountain Dew can I buy with this? So that's what got that really got it going. And then I have a normal career too, and I was doing just like boring Citrix, like remote server stuff. I got a computer science degree in college, undergrad. I wanted to be a sports broadcaster. I wanted to be a play-by-play announcer, a color commentator. And I'm going back to my dad here, but this is a good story. He wanted me to go for computer science because you get a job, you get a career. He was right, but I wanted to do sports broadcasting. And I went to this college that actually had a sports broadcasting department. And turns out that the year I was a freshman, Lanny Fratteri, who was a longtime Pittsburgh Pirates play-by-play announcer, was starting. He had retired from the Pirates, and he was a professor there. So he was a sports broadcasting professor. So I like begged my dad to let me switch to sports broadcasting instead of computer science, because I just wasn't really into it. And he said, you can do that, but you can't. I'm not going to help you pay for it at all. So I was at least wise enough to be like, all right, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to, I'll let him help me out. And then I'll get a minor in sports broadcasting or whatever. So I ended up doing that too for fun. Did get to announce some baseball games and became friends with Lanny Fratteri, which was cool. But anyway, yeah, graduated with a computer science degree, quickly got a job in that because easy enough to do that. Everybody needs people that know how to work computers. Anyway, so then 2020, about 7 years in my career, I just kind of wanted to switch it up. Got a data science master's degree with my company's help. And that that fused the two things together. I had then the coding skills, the statistical skills for modeling, projections, machine learning, all that stuff. And then I just put the fantasy baseball stuff in with it. And wrote for Rotoballer for a few years, wrote a year for Fantasy Pros, and then decided to go on my own, not rely on anybody else's approval. And that's where I'm at now. So it's been good.
Now, I have a big question for you. Maybe some of the listeners will care about this, maybe not. When people are thinking of doing new projection models, we're seeing a lot more of them pop up, right? You've been in the industry, you have the experience. The hardest thing that I've heard from people is the scraping of data from either Baseball Reference, fan graphs, right? It doesn't seem as though it's an easy process. I don't have the technical skill to understand that necessarily, but my question for you is, do you feel like over the next 10 years, baseball will make it easier for the individual content creator to scrape that data? Or do you think it'll always be an issue where data is kind of scattered and the engineer has to go out and capture that data?
It's gotten easier. It is pretty easy, I would say.
Okay.
But they set up whole APIs, simple one line of code that you can get some data. Now, to do things with it that are unique and creative, you have to be creative, first of all, and then you have to kind of to hone your skills and kind of know the more advanced coding stuff. But yeah, I mean, Fangraphs has an API. Like, you have to know coding for sure, and it's not the easiest thing in the world to do. And I don't even think it's really something that any kind of person can do. But if you do play fantasy baseball, you're probably kind of an analytical mind, and your brain can kind of function like that, right? Like I don't think I could teach my wife. She's very smart, but I don't think I could ever teach her coding. But she is brilliant in art and just logic with kids, with everything she does. Like, she was a really fantastic, like, she worked as an eye doctor's assistant or a vision therapist for a while, and she was excellent at that. So it's not a knock on her intelligence. It's just the fact that like there's this kind of brain that just doesn't really, it's never really going to quite get it. But if you have an analytical brain, then yeah, it takes some time and some effort, but you can definitely do it. And then yeah, to your answer your question, I think it's already moving that way. And that's something I've worried because I've wondered and worried a little bit about, is because my whole thing, like it started, my Substack started with the daily projections, which were terrible at first, but they're pretty good now. And then this daily notes thing I do during the season. So I wrote a Python script to go get yesterday's data from MLB that it publishes every night, and then just make a bunch of cut leaderboards and write stuff. It like writes an article for me, and then I just copy paste it every morning. I said, well, this is a pretty good way to not have to do a whole lot of work and put a bunch of stuff out, right? But then I was always wondering, like, what if they shut off this free data? You know, what if MLB starts saying, we're not going to give this to everybody? Like, that would put me out of business real quick. It would break my projection model. I don't think that's going to happen because I think they like what people like us are doing with it, and it's kind of spreading the game and kind of it's working to their benefit too. But there is maybe down the road some risk of that they're like, well, we don't really want everybody having access to our data. Although what we've seen is that with bat speed came out last year, right? Like it's going in the other direction. They're giving more and more for free rather than less and less. So
have you had any club reach out to you yet?
No.
Okay, because that might also be something. It's almost like it's not illegal, but you know, you're talking about the CIA or the FBI, they hire the best hackers kind of deal, right? So you guys are the rogues. I know that Scout the Stat Line has had, and I'm not going to get into specifics, but there's been some contact made in the past, and so I'd only imagine the more you do this, the more you might run into something cool like that. And then again, like you may not want to, you may want to look into some kind of deal, but frankly, you know, I could see you said earlier how you don't want someone else's approval. I think I get that vibe from you. I think that's certainly a way you can operate in this industry.
I would turn any job. I have no desire to work for a major league team. I would say no immediately. And they wouldn't offer me anyway. If they read through my Twitter's not that bad, but I'm not like most of these guys that are doing the similar stuff, you know, the big names. I don't know, Eric Cross, Chris Clegg, those guys, like really awesome. I mean, you guys are familiar with them for sure. Prospect guys, like I can tell they just stick to. They don't say anything other than. And I know I've talked to some of these guys, and I kind of know that they have opinions and they're certain bent and stuff, but they stick to business. But I'm not able to do that. I can see the appeal of it, and it probably would be better for my like followers and subscribers, but I don't know. I don't have that in me. So, and I don't even think baseball has necessarily some kind of bias. You know, I'm a Christian. I'm pretty outspoken about that. There's no bias against that. Certainly, I'm not saying that I couldn't get a job because I'm an outspoken Christian, but they probably would rather just have someone who's not putting their personal stuff out there one way or the other. So I don't think it would happen. I have had like some hitting coaches and some, actually a major league hitting coach one time asked me for some data, and like this guy's not affiliated with a team, but he's like a professional hitter coach. He has his own little business, and I've talked to him about doing stuff. So some cool stuff like that. A little bit of contracts, quick like data reports on the side and stuff like that. But yeah, nothing big. And I'm really, really happy with how my life is right now. So I don't want anything to change.
There you go. And you seem like, I mean, I would say that self-awareness is becoming a rarer commodity by the day, it seems. So you seem like a real self-aware guy. You know what works for you, what doesn't. Now,
I have 3. You can see behind me. I don't know if this is going to go on video, but I have 3 kids. They're all right there. Like there's a floor above me, and they're probably all throwing everything around. So they've had me in the house their whole lives. I've worked from home, so don't think it would even quite be my duty to all of a sudden being away from home for extended periods of time. So
it's interesting. I have a buddy that went to University of Miami. He went for broadcast journalism or journalism and wanted to get into sports. A good guy, you know, very, very much toes the line in all regards for the political correct behavior. But he said to me on multiple occasions that he would just never have fit into the industry because he wants to have an opinion. And I think it's funny because I'm like, okay, you know, you individual, you're the perfect person to fall into that because you don't have this outlandish desire to be you all the time. But to hear him even say that he wouldn't have made it because he would have an issue with constantly falling in line with the narrative of whatever organization he works for I thought was interesting. You know, you talking about that desire when you were in college, like, do you think you would have been able to have a career in broadcast, or do you feel like your personality would have outshined and you would have had to separate?
I bet I would have gotten it. If I would have started right out of college, you're not really you don't really know anything. You don't really have a personality out of college. So I think you're just kind of formed by wherever you go from there. So I probably just would have ended up like whatever, I'd probably be 250 pounds heavier and, like super out of shape and addicted to alcohol and stuff, like a normal sports talk show guy. So that's probably just what it would have been. I don't think I would have been the same guy, but I did have one internship in 2012. I was 21. I had an internship with an online radio station, Trib Live. The Pittsburgh newspaper, the Tribune Review, had a online radio station. Not very big, didn't pay anything. Got shut down a few years after that. But I got a press pass for it. And I went in and I started meeting these guys that I had read and that I was big fans of, the reporters. Got in the clubhouse. It was a really cool summer. But what I realized is these guys are all miserable. Like, these old, like lifelong Pirates reporters, the beat guy. Like, there was no job I thought would have been cooler to be like the Pirates beat writer in college. And I do think that was a path I could have probably attained. I think I'm personable and good enough at this stuff to have turned into something like that. But after I saw those guys looking just like they hated everything and they all looked like just super rough and like miserable, I was like, maybe this isn't the path to go. So glad I took my dad's advice and ended up where I'm at.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that's a common notion that we don't need to get into, but the adults usually were right when they gave us advice.
Yeah.
Doc, are we ready to get into the main segment of today?
I was born ready, brother. What are you talking about? Let's get into it. Let's do it.
So I'm going to call this "Are We Guessing?" And I think it's a fair concept of what the topic John brought up. And John, I'm going to kind of let you explain it to the audience because I think you have a better grasp of exactly what we want to talk about today. But Doc and I are going to try and come with some actual tangible evidence as to how we are identifying players. But
John is going to insult us, and we're going to punch back. Go.
Yeah, I think that you guys will get clicks and likes and tweet likes, and people really like to hear the prospect list. I mean, my God, it's insane what I've mentioned Chris Clegg before, Dynasty Dugout on Substack. I think there's like a top 100 on the Substack sports leaderboard, and I think I'm in the top 60, but he's like in the top 10. His numbers are amazing. He's gone full time just writing about prospects, and that's like fantastic. Like, people are buying what he's selling. It's great. He does good work. I do not mean this to knock him. I do mean it to knock you guys because now I know you and you take it, but I don't know Chris well enough to be like, and he's not even here to defend himself either, so that wouldn't be cool. But yeah, I'm just like, I could probably go out every day and put up a random list of prospects and tweet it out and like maybe even write about it and have people pay me for it. And it didn't really matter what I was saying or if I was right because nobody would ever know. You're not going to check on my work 3 years later to see if I was right about some first year player guy, right? And I could get really successful while just completely selling snake oil, right? And I've tried. I'm sure that there are ways to know who's more likely to be successful and less. It's not like you're totally picking like randomly, but I'm just saying you could become a pretty well-known prospect writer without ever being right about a single thing because it's hard to check.
I mean, just for reference, before you jump in, Doc, this is MLB Pipeline's 2020. Anyone can go on MLB Pipeline or any other prospect resource and just look at past years. But I think that's the best relevance point to your concept. 2020 had Wander Franco, Gavin Lux, Luis Robert, Ali Rutschman, Mackenzie Gore, Joe Adell, Casey Maez, Nate Pearson, Royce Lewis, and then Bobby Witt at 10. So really our only big superstar is Bobby Witt, followed by probably Adley Rutschman, Royce Lewis.
They're mostly major leaguers, though.
They are mostly major leaguers, right? This is a good list. If you look back on a 10-year rolling cycle, the top 10 is pretty pathetic. Like Jurickson Profar was a top 1. That's a number 1. And I think it's getting better. But to your point, I said this to a buddy the other day, and I think Doc, you and I've talked about it. Like, we have to wait 5 years for things to materialize before we even know if our opinion is correct, right? If our scouting approach, whether it's numbers based or more body based or a blend, is correct, where we actually are providing value, it's 5 to 10 years that you have to look back and you have to pull that personal data as well. Doc, what were you going to say?
Essentially, I think there's some truth to this, but the cream of the crop rises to the top, as Macho Man Randy Savage would say. So, like there's with the way the X is going these days, formerly Twitter, I do see a lot of guys out there, and when there's a certain like algorithm catching, like the big one lately has been why, this guy is going to be great, a thread. And it's just like a pick, and the algorithmic hack, if no one was aware of this, is or was, picture and then some stats, picture and then some stats, and then it just keeps going. And basically, like the worst of these will be just like essentially you're just reading off Baseball Reference or Fangraphs, but slowly and more annoying. But the algorithm loves it, so it really boosts you up. And so again, like some people out there who were doing this, frankly, when I see the little thread thing now, it turns me off because so many people did it. And it's not to say they can't have good threads, but I think it was you the other day. Actually, this is great. I actually didn't have this planned. I think you, John, said something. This is all going to be in one tweet. Is that what you said? Did you say something like that?
I did.
This is all going to be in one message.
Position previews in one tweet. Yeah, that's what I've been doing.
Yeah, and dude, that's like, and I bet you, and I saw it did well. I mean, your stuff typically I think does well. You got a big audience, but for me personally, I was like, that's so much more attractive. I don't have to go cut through the BS. And frankly, go on.
Well, they changed it like a year and a half ago where you had to do threads before if you wanted to say a lot, but now there's no limit. Is that only for premium people though on X?
It is only for premium, but I'm seeing guys with premium do it. So it must have been some kind of algorithm hack. But I mean, yeah. I guess if I was going to go further than that, like that's an example of it's accessible to blow up and get big hits without really giving something that stands out. But over time, people like me, I don't think I'm like a genius. I think other people notice too, and they're like, "Gosh, how do I know who to trust here?" And frankly, if you see someone who's either giving you the same bland content or not improving, it's fine to start somewhere. A lot of these guys are just starting; it's fine. But if you are stagnating, if you're not offering anything, if a lot of the guys you're hyping are duds, personally, I'm logging that, and I'm not going to go. Like frankly, MLB Pipeline. I'm wary of them. I think that they're a good baseline, and they're unmatched when it goes to their access to prospects, when it goes to access to real scouts, but their actual rankings often are not that accurate. So you got to kind of be ahead of them.
It's harder for me because my Substack is mostly focused on like this year's fantasy leagues. I'll help you beat your 11 coworkers. Like that's kind of the audience I want to hit. So if I start, like nothing I would ever do or anything like this, but say it's last year and I start hyping up Griffin Canning like crazy and everybody that, I guess this is something I did, right? Like I put a ton of people on Griffin Canning and 3 months later it was shown that was horrible and he was terrible. And he like ended, I did a couple of those gladiator leagues where you draft 26 players and then you're stuck. You can't bench, you can't drop. You take every stat. You can't put anybody in the bench. Griffin Canning alone ruined 2 of those, so those people that took my advice on that, luckily I had other good ones, but they can remember 3 months ago. John Anderson said Griffin Canning was gonna be great. He's killing me. But if you say, I don't know who the big guy, Matt Shaw, get him, that's probably too late for that, but whatever. If you have your number 1 first year player draft guy and someone goes out and gets them first pick, by the time, and say that guy totally fails, it'll take 3 years for them to realize, oh, that totally failed. They won't remember who told them in the first place. You're off the hook,
Well, I think what you just said is the hit. And Doc, I want you to circle back on this when I finish. In Dynasty, it's a unique group of people, and minor league players are trade chips / stocks, right? So I think Matt Shaw is a perfect example. Matt Shaw 6 months ago did not have the same value Matt Shaw has today. Matt Shaw was the same player he was 6 months ago, but he was just a minor league asset. So, if you're a dynasty owner, you're thinking about all the guys that we talk about. And another one that really comes to mind is Travis Sikora right now, right? Has the hip labrum injury, which sucks. So his value has fallen. But up until that news, Travis Sikora was really starting to rise in the dynasty ranks. Travis Sikora won't provide major league value, I would assume, for 3 years, 2 at the minimum. But in our community, it's the stock value, right? Like if he's going up and you're holding that stock, in most cases, you're going to either move that stock in the dynasty community, or you really are going to sit on him because you believe in him. Maybe it's Matt or it's Doc or it's Ross or it's Clegg that advised you to originally like this guy, but you kind of fall in love with the idea of that stock mentality. So I think Dynasty is unique in that aspect because for the most part, our community does like the same people. has some different opinions, right? And that's what makes things unique. But I think the really dangerous part for this community is the people that want to go really fringe. And Doc, you kind of mentioned it, like the guys that are going to go 5 threads deep on a guy that's a top 400 prospect, but that's their content. Because in 3 or 4 years, their base is going to look back and say, what value did you actually provide me? We're going to be wrong about guys, but usually we're going to be more right because we follow industry trends. And also we look at it from like, what is your minor league stock as opposed to what is your major league return? Because when we look back, as I said, on the last 20 years of prospects, like the return is questionable at times, but their value at that minor league level is what the industry says it is. So I think that's the biggest take I have on that.
John, what's the deepest league you play in, and do you play in dynasty leagues? Period.
No dynasty at all.
Okay.
Nothing even. I'm in one league. I'm in a home league with my friends. We do 2 keepers a year. That's it. So it's pretty much fresh start, and then I do NFBC stuff, but that's it.
Yeah. So we got basically what I have found is that this industry is super niche, but the guys who buy in all the way quite often. So even like we just announced a Scout the Stat line. Hey, anyone? Maybe we figured we'd get like 30 guys. Maybe if we barely get 30 guys. Hey, anyone want a 30 teamer for Dynasty Startup for Scout the Stat line? Which is like, when I first got into Dynasty, if you asked me if I wanted to join a 30 teamer, I'd call you insane. And now I'm in like several. Anyway, so we had an overflow. We actually had to turn guys down after filling 2 leagues. So it's just like, it's deep. And so when you're in those positions, like you could imagine eventually kind of like the Pareto theory, I believe it's called, or effect. Basically someone's going to get a stacked MLB roster at some point, probably. And so how do you defeat that? Well, you have to go to prospects. It's kind of a simulation of the real MLB, right? A healthy and kind of like what Matt said. It's not even necessarily that every single guy turns into a superstar. It's knowing when to cash out, and sometimes that is right when they're about to make the big leagues. Like I saw Matt give bad advice today. I'm gonna call him out. He said cut Caleb Durbin. I'm like, bro, even if you don't like Caleb Durbin, wait until like he's just about to do his first game and then sell him. Don't sell him now. And I'm a big Durbin guy. I think he's going to be good this year. But yeah, all in all, in terms of the prospect game, I guess we are outliers. So we work for Scout the Stat line, which, are you familiar with Scout the Stat line at all?
No, sorry.
It's okay. Basically, it's like what you do, but for minor league projections. So essentially, we've got a track record now of basically, it's Jordan Rosenblum's a big behind the scenes guy for it. He's doing that oopsie that's featured on Fangraphs now. So, he's incorporating Stuff Plus. He's incorporating all these cool, frankly, it's beyond my tiny brain. I'm the kind, me and Matt here are kind of like that. We take the model, we take the stats, we fuse it with, scout speak or scout analysis. And I think that's probably the best way that you're going to hit here is if you don't go full one extreme or one the other. We've gone too Moneyball in my opinion. And I guess I would ask you, coming back, after this big old rant, that's basically all I have to say in terms of defending prospecting, which, if you're not in a dynasty, I could see why it's not as big of a deal. But do you think that the industry has gone maybe too Moneyball, too statistically oriented, or is that not, or where do you think?
All right, fantasy baseball is statistics. That's how you win, So I don't know. You can go too statistical if you're doing the statistics stupidly, which a lot of people do. I'm not sure exactly what you mean. I would say it's hard to be too statistical in a game that is determined by statistics.
Maybe it's something that where you're seeing mirages, and this is more likely to happen in the minor league levels because there's a guy, like you said, I think it was off air. What's the difference between a high A or low A or double A or triple A? How do you know what we're looking at here? And that's where you can have these quote unquote mirages. Or you can have it where a guy's either overperforming or underperforming. So let's just say there's a guy like Colt Emerson's a great example. Are you familiar with Colt, Seattle Mariners prospect?
Emerson Hancock. I know that.
Okay.
I know that guy.
Okay. Well, Colt Emerson.
He was a top prospect that sucked. So there you go.
Here's a guy who I think you might know, Trey Turner.
Trey Turner. Yeah.
Yeah. Here we go. Now we're talking.
Named my son after him. My son is named Trey.
I love that. Great. I've been saying trail like a jerk.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I'll start calling my kid. I'll change his pronunciation.
Based on this podcast. Anyway, Turner, I think his power kind of came out of nowhere, right? Like he came out as supposed to be the speed guy, maybe maybe give you some hit tool, certainly. But the power kind of came out of nowhere, and I guess he's not necessarily the best example, but there's guys with these bigger 6 foot to 6'4" maybe frames, but maybe they're skinnier, and you call them projectable. That's where you get the scout talk. So, maybe he's projectable. Yeah, he's not hitting home runs in the minor leagues or even in the early major leagues seasons of his career. But you're like, yeah, we could see how he could get there if he just maybe changes his launch angle, if he does this, that, or the other. I mean, a good example would be Miguel Garcia right now. That's not projectable frame, but that's certainly like a way you could see, oh, dude, can we just change your launch angle? Because you're smacking that ball really hard. And so, yeah, you can see that kind of things. And then the other aspect I would say that stats will not be able to capture at all is just your brain. And it's a thinking man's sport. So that's when they're talking about makeup and IQ. I mean, Ross Jensen, who's our guy, he's a big scout the stat line guy. I talk to him about that all the time, and he's like, I don't like it. I can't measure it. I'm like, I get it. I'm not going to hammer you for it, but I guess that would be what I'm talking about in terms of are we not considering these things enough? In analysis.
Yeah, that's like does the hot hitter exist thing? Like maybe it does, but you can't measure it, so why even worry about it? Like if I can't know it's in a guy's brain, it's better to just act like it doesn't exist because I won't do any good trying to guess at it anyway. The other thing with I can project a major leaguer pretty well because he's been in the league. Typically, if you're in the major leagues for a couple of years, you've solidified who you are, what you're trying to do, how good you are at it. You're not trying to remake yourself, and your body's not changing except for kind of for the worse. But when you're trying to project minor league guys, this is kind of I think the reason that I don't know, I was just looking at Jackson Holiday versus Jackson Merrill. Like if we acted like it was a year ago and you were comparing those two and you looked at all the numbers in the minor leagues, wouldn't every single person be like Holiday by a mile, right? Like maybe there's some numbers I didn't have or wasn't seeing. And Merrill never played in AAA. I found that out. So he didn't have some of that like advanced numbers, and maybe that would have turned us back onto him a little bit or something like that. But when you're looking at the minor league numbers, there's a few things you can look at. But the other problem is like a lot of these guys, you're talking about 20-year-olds, and I suppose most males are done growing at 20, but you're certainly more capable of putting on muscle at a higher rate. I would imagine like you're kind of in that physical peak or pre-peak where like your body can change a lot over one off season. And not only that, your whole approach can change, the coaching, you're kind of a work in progress, your clay that's being molded. So I'm sure with a lot of these guys, you don't know it. You can't tell who, but it's almost like I'm going to come into this 2025 season, do something completely different. I'm a totally new guy. So for the projectors out there, throw all the old data out, but we're not going to know that. We're going to keep using the old data, trying to project it, and you've changed everything. So it's just obviously nobody's saying it's easy or possible to project anywhere near as well for minor leaguers as major leaguers. But I just think it seems like it's to the point where it is like pretty close to a random crapshoot. And I don't know, for my business purposes, I've decided let me stick with what I can work with. I know I'm pretty good at telling you what major leaguers can help your fantasy team this year, so I'll stick with that. But and the appeal of it, man, like what you said, it was a couple months ago. I think I had are you familiar with Zombie Dust, the IPA up here in Michigan?
IPAs are the worst kind of beer, brother, but I think I've heard of it.
Okay. All right. Sorry. Stick to your raw milk, I guess. But I had a couple of those, and I was like, yeah, Dynasty League. That sounds fun, And I was like, so I went like 10 o'clock. I was just like tweeted, I think it'd be fun to start a Dynasty League. Just like totally off the cuff. And then I went to bed, right? I woke up to like 50 people being like, let me know, get in that. And then I woke up, I was like, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to do Dynasty League at all. I was like, so all those people were disappointed. But yeah, the reaction from it is crazy. And those people are willing to pay, to be loyal subscribers, whatever, to read everything. I mean, doesn't Clegg do like didn't he rank 1,000 prospects or something last year? Like just so
he gets wild with it.
So insane, but they'll read every word. So these people are nuts, and it's endearing, honestly.
Well, I want to circle back on the Merrill and Holiday because I think it was a great point you brought up, and that's another piece within the prospect game that I think we as prospectors really try to focus on, which is the multiple variables within, profiling a player. Merrill was aggressively pushed. And so was Holiday, but Holiday was nailing each level where Merrill never really got a chance to really show a great profile because he was so aggressively pushed. And so you mentioned missing AAA.
You
Obviously,
mean by
they
the
bring him.
Padres?
Yep.
Like up the yeah. Okay.
Yeah, they bring him over to the Korea series last year, and everyone's kind of like, "Well, what is he going to be like?" We haven't seen that big minor league breakout yet, and it's like, "Oh wow!" To your point, like he developed, he was able to make adjustments at the major league level, had amazing rookie season. We never even had the shot as prospectors to really do anything outside of theorize maybe he could do this. Whereas Jackson Holiday, every single level kept dominating, and as prospectors, we were like, "All right, well, like this is what he's showing us." But he never had to make the adjustments. He never really got challenged until he was in AAA with high fastball with a velocity over 94 miles an hour. Even that data we couldn't aggregate properly. Like there were things about Holiday's profile that we just couldn't know. As opposed to Merrill, it was like same concept but different side of the ballpark. So that makes it really difficult. But all you can really do as a prospector is lean on that notion of, okay, just because a guy dominates all the way through the minor leagues doesn't mean he's going to just come up and have success. Torkelson had really good numbers in the minor leagues. But again, that data that we need, which is his inability to hit anything than a fastball, wasn't necessarily in front of us. I think Merrill's a great case. And Doc, I just wanted to swing back because I think the Durbin comment you made actually highlights my point, which is, if you're looking at dynasty assets, minor league players as assets, you're always trying to have the best asset. We had a guy on Twitter ask us basically, would you cut any of these players for Pablo Guerrero, which is Vladdy's younger brother, who had the highest exit velocity in riser in 2024 in the minor leagues? He's 18. It's like Pablo could easily, by the end of 2025, be a top 50 prospect. He has some contact concerns, though, and his strikeout rate is not the greatest. He's 18. It's like, okay, at the end of 2025, who is the better dynasty asset? Is it Caleb Durbin or is it Pablo Guerrero? I think it's easy that they're both equal at the end of 2025. But if Durbin doesn't do what we expect in the major leagues and Pablo has a great 2025, who would you rather have if you're trying to trade for a Paul Skeens? In my opinion, it's Pablo Guerrero. But it's like Pablo Guerrero won't be in the major leagues for 3 to 4 years. So it doesn't matter if I'm right or wrong. It's really more or less Caleb Durbin, right? And these are the conversations we get in with Dynasty where it's like, this is a real concept that someone asks us. It's hard to know. Doc, I just wanted you to touch on that real quick because I know you love Durbin. And I think that's an interesting comparison from a 24-year-old that's going to be making his major league debut to an 18-year-old in complex.
Well, again, so it depends on what kind of leagues you're playing in, right? So,
Yep.
and frankly, what you're valuing. So my ranks will value upside, but also I have to respect it if you're just crushing the game. Like you look at Caleb Durbin's contact rates, they're out of this world. And he's basically putting up 300 average, 400 OBP, all the way up through AAA. So when he goes and does it in Arizona Fall League against cruddy pitchers, it's like, it's not like that was the only time he did it. He broke the Arizona Fall League stolen base record too. So I don't know if you play in a league that values stolen bases and ratios, and if you can get anywhere near the top of that lineup, maybe lead off Milwaukee, then now runs too. And frankly, he flashed some power. This guy's like 5'6" and 185.
Yeah.
Just a muscle ball, right? So I don't know, right? Of course, this guy doesn't have 20 or 30 home run real upside, so you're not getting that. But he's going to be a major leaguer as of opening day, almost certainly, barring injury. And then when he gets there, he's going to be eligible at a bunch of different positions, which becomes extremely valuable in certain deep leagues. And yeah, how many times do we have to sacrifice every ratio for stolen bases? How many times do we have to go through a Billy Hamilton? So I think there's value there versus Pablo Guerrero could be 40 home runs 10 years from now, or maybe it's just his name that we're falling in love with and we wouldn't respect him otherwise.
It would be tough to be Vladimir Guerrero's kid and then be named Pablo while your older brother is also named Vladimir. And
his younger brother's name's Vladdy.
No way.
There's two more. Yeah, there's one more other than the one in the.
This kid has no chance. His dad didn't.
They have
daddy
moms.
issues for sure. Okay, all right. So
we're doing the Elon Musk thing.
All right,
definitely doing the Elon. Yeah,
I wonder that too. With I saw that Matt Holliday's other kid is now the #1 high school. It's just like, are they just like are they just lazy and they're like, does Matt Holliday have another kid? Like, oh, he's a senior, let's go. Like him, he's number one. Like, there's a lot of this family stuff. And you see like Tatis. I mean, even just especially now, right? Like Tatis, Vlad. We have all these like young stars that had fathers that were. Fernando Tatis Sr. wasn't anything special, but like we've seen a lot of that.
Slams in an inning, which
right.
Cool.
I remember
that's about it.
Yeah. And maybe, who knows, would Fernando Tatis Jr. be in the majors if his dad hadn't had that second grand slam that inning? The butterfly effect. But I don't know. Like, yeah, it seems like there's a lot of this nepotism or whatever. But I don't know. That's not as interesting to talk about. I did get stuck on like Tyler Black last year, and I guess he never really got a chance. But I would like your advice, because when you're doing a 50-round draft, you have to take some minor leaguers. Like, there's no doubt that's the right way to go. Is you can take Durbin, someone like that could possibly be something very good, or it's like him, or I don't know, like
Tyler Black,
Brian Hayes, or something like that. Like they're a major leaguer maybe, but they're not going to help you. Yeah. So I saw Black's speed and his on base percentage in the minors, and it was because he walked a ton. But then it's a different thing. Like Jackson Holliday walked a ton in the minors, and that's probably why he did so well. But was it just because minor league pitchers were a little bit afraid of him and was kind of willing to work around him because they didn't want their numbers hurt by this perceived superstar player? And then when you get to the upper levels or the majors, they're like, I'm not afraid of this kid, or at least he's got to earn it, so I'll throw him strikes. And then you find out. So again, Black's not the greatest example, because I wouldn't say he failed last year. The pick failed, but he didn't like get a lot of opportunity, right? Like, that's kind of why he didn't. I don't know, maybe he would have, but the point is, like, on base percentage, walk rates are pretty much, is that minor league number, are those even useful? Do they translate at all, or is it totally random going from minors to majors in this walk rate regard?
So
Go ahead, Doc.
You opened your mouth. Okay. I'll say my bit, then and Matt is actually a Milwaukee Brewers fan, so I will definitely turn it over to him after this. But I will say Tyler Black, this is a great example of something where the stats don't say it all, because he doesn't play defense. He basically is like a guy who doesn't have a ton of power. He has okay power. Like maybe he can give you 15 home runs, but he didn't show it at the major league level last year. And so it's just a situation where a team like the Brewers, they want to plug in these guys who aren't really flashy, but we can plug you in at shortstop, third base, second base, maybe outfield, and Black, for a guy who's kind of fast, can't really do anything, unfortunately. So he's a first baseman now without power, so he's screwed. I'm really down on Black because of that. Like, I hope he works it out and figures out just enough to make a big league career happen, because I am rooting for all these kids. Whereas Caleb Durbin, you're seeing him playing at AAA, so on the precipice of MLB at what I just said, third base, second base, shortstop, and outfield. So it's like, that's a guy who's going to get to play as long as he gets on base, because he is such a great defender. So that's what the stats won't show.
That's my question. 13% walk rate last year. What do you think that makes him more likely to have 9-10% in the majors, or not necessarily?
In my opinion, no. And Doc, I want you to re-answer that once I'm done, because I think we might have a differing opinion here. But that's where we get into the variable aspect that is incredibly hard to gauge. Doc and I talked about Luke Adams a couple of weeks ago on the third base preview for STS. The guy had a 450 on base percentage at high A this season. Unbelievable. Now the real question is not tapping into his power, right? He's 6'4", 220. Kid's massive. Should hit 40 home runs this season, right? We look at the body type. It's like, okay, when you're getting on base at a 450 clip, like, is it really that you're not aggressive enough? Like, that's a big problem. So we need to track that at AA and AAA for Luke Adams. I think back to Jackson Holliday, this is where things get really hard, and this is a correlation to Tyler Black. Pitchers at double, single A, high A cannot locate exactly where they want. Jackson Holliday's biggest weakness is up in the zone with high velocity. Like, the likelihood in the minor leagues is if they're going to try to hit that spot, it's going to be an inch off the zone anyways. It's going to be a ball. So you're not really finding out that Jackson Holliday has a problem, because he doesn't have Shane Baz throwing it up and in on him, right? Like, he doesn't have guys throwing a cutter in on his hands at 94. You just haven't seen that data yet. At least not enough of it. So Tyler Black, kind of like Doc had mentioned, like, lacking tools in certain areas that are really important, really leaned on his ability for plate vision, especially coming out of college. That's why he was drafted in the second round by Milwaukee. He was a hitter out of college. Well, He was a hitter out of college, not at, Wake Forest, not at Clemson. He was at a lower tier college. So put him into the minor leagues, you start to see some of those skills still play because he is still ahead of these guys. But as soon as we get to AA, you start to see some of those numbers fall back down. So he starts to lean on the plate approach, the vision starts to steal bags, and we get excited again. But like his profile coming out of high A was already concerning. Mike Bovey's another guy from Milwaukee, almost the same situation where it's like, okay, once you get into the higher ranks of the minors, like, is this really going to work? Because you're going to face better talent. So I don't think on base percentage is necessarily a fair skill to really look at as a translatable tool for especially rookie season and sophomore season. I do think it's a career approach. If you can get a guy through those first 3 seasons, I do think that approach will come back once they've made their adjustments at the major league level. But I think the first 3 years are almost impossible to really gauge that if it's going to translate. And then just before I pass it off to you, Doc, the big thing I look for in redraft leagues from rookies, I look for exit velocity and contact rates. Like, can you hit the ball hard so that even if you're striking out at a 25% clip in the major leagues, maybe you have a shot at a 250 average. Maybe I have some home runs in you. If you can't hit the ball hard, the likelihood is you're not going to hit your prime until you're 27, 28 because you just haven't shown me a skill that plays at the major leagues.
I say Vientos last year. Good example, right?
Yeah, he had the worst at bat I have ever seen in my life in Milwaukee 2 years ago. He swung at 3 pitches that I thought were horrendous. He looked overmatched. I literally that day wrote him off for his career. I said, I'm done. Like you'll never be able to play if you're going to swing at pitches like that.
Maybe he was drunk or something. You can't do one day.
I mean, he's in Milwaukee, so I don't blame him if he's drunk. Doc, what did you think about kind of what I said about on base percentage, and then like the skills you're looking to translate if you're drafting a guy for this season?
So interesting. I'm looking at Tyler Black's fan graphs and Savant pages. His Savant page is puke worthy. It's so bad. He's actually not even. He wasn't fast last year.
He's not actually fast. This is to your point of like minor league numbers are skewed at the lower levels. He's like I would bet you he's like a 68th percentile sprint speed at best.
Dude, last year he was 32nd, which it can't be accurate. I'm stumbling over my words because that's just so weird.
He isn't fast. I will tell you that.
Do you think I'm fast? Like, are these baseball players all really? I've wondered that. Like, could I beat an offensive lineman, an NFL offensive lineman in a race? Like, we're talking about fast and slow, but are all professional athletes fast? Or, I'm probably faster than Vlad, right? I weigh 150 pounds.
Have you seen Tom Brady run? Have you seen Peyton Manning run?
I guess I don't know. All right.
Yeah. You sometimes wasn't there a politician who said about pornography? He said, when you see it, you know it.
I can't define it, but I know it when I see it.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. There you go. You nailed it. So Black, I mean, he actually had an unbelievable walk rate and lack of chase rate last year in the majors, which will take you some ways. But again, it's just that not having a defensive position it makes it hard to have him up at the major league level and let him develop there. So his career's not over, but we're going to see Tyler Black, I would imagine, in AAA for quite a bit of this year. And frankly, this is for a different podcast, but Richie got me on to Blake Burke, Matt Morris. We got to talk about him sometime. I can't believe I missed this guy. John, just watch out. This guy with a cool name, Blake Burke, he's going to come up here and probably leapfrog Tyler Black and just hit like 30 home runs. Doesn't play defense, kind of like Vientos. Like he's just kind of like whatever at defense, but that power will get you a long way. Durbin's just this weird guy where Tyler Black.
Blake Burke has 18 plate appearances in A+.
Oh yeah, he just got drafted this year. This is his pro debut.
All right. You're like falling in love with it. Okay, all right.
Well, you'll see. I've got some hits. Have you know who Bryce Eldridge is?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so he's like the 6'7". He was a two-way guy for a second. Bryce Eldridge. He's San Francisco Giants first. This is actually going to be on your radar. If he's not, you should be. This year will almost certainly debut with the San Francisco Giants.
Okay, Doc, but that's a perfect example for John. I would take Bryce Eldridge this season in a redraft over ever even considering Tyler Black last year. Yeah. Bryce Eldridge, incredible exit velocities. He has at each level, he struggled a little bit, made adjustments. He's got a big physical, like traditional scout frame. Like Giants
he had
need
a beard
him.
He had a beard as a teenager.
Like he is the guy where it's like if they call him up in August, John, and you took him in a gladiator league, that might just give you 8 home runs and a 250, 260 average rest of the way may just win you a league. Tyler Black was never going to win you a league, in my opinion.
So I have these dashboards. I actually have a minor league StatCast dashboard, which is pretty good, but like you guys must be looking at. You said this guy has incredible exit velocities. I only have 20 balls in play tracked, so you must be looking at college stuff.
Eldridge?
Yeah.
At least personally, I'll lean on Baseball America's write-ups more than I will anything else because our data is so difficult. Like we talked to Clegg about this. Like he gets his data from people in organizations where they're like, you can't say where you got this from, but we'll give it to you. You know what I mean? It's like, well, that puts us at a disadvantage. But all we can do as prospectors with some of these guys is lean on the people we trust most with where they're getting their data. Right.
Can I share a screen real quick? Can I do that?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
I just want to show you.
Start screaming? What did you say?
Share screen. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Share screening.
Look,
I didn't even know we had this. Look, folks, the first time ever on Dynasty Diggers. I didn't even know we could
sharing
do this.
screens.
I'm such a boomer. I watch black and white westerns. This is fascinating to me.
This is my minor league StatCast Tableau dashboard. It's got all levels, and then when it has games in A+ and AAA, which with StatCast stuff, you can see this business. So I've been pulling up all these dudes you're talking about, but then I get confused because I guess you professionals, like you just said with Clegg, that's pretty interesting that he's got access to data that isn't free. So this is all just the free stuff you can get through the MLB API, but I don't know. This is where I look for minor leaguers. So I'm way behind. Even if I was trying to compete, I guess I'd be way behind because I'm only looking at actual major league affiliated games. But here's what I got. So
this is great, folks. If you're just listening, go take a look at whatever this is, like 50 minutes in or something like that. Go check out our YouTube or the video version of this podcast because you're getting a little snippet, little preview of what you could get with John here.
But you're making it sound like it's not. I'm gonna be led the wrong way more often than not, just looking at this. So I'll stop that. But thanks.
No.
But that's the root of the problem we have, John. Is Jesus Mate from Milwaukee is a DSL superstar. I have him aggressively ranked in my ranks. Jeff Ponce has really put him out there for Baseball America.
I don't.
As
very upsetting that that's how you pronounce it. I'm really upset that here you pronounced.
Which one?
Jesus made.
Oh, yeah, Jesus made.
That's like straight out of Colossians, Jesus at the beginning, Jesus made.
For our show, out of respect today, I will refer to him as Jesus made.
And the Bible does say that Jesus, Bible lesson, theology, God didn't create, Jesus created. Jesus himself was the creator. So it works. The name works perfectly because it's true. So go ahead.
I mean, as a Brewer fan, I'm hoping he's the biblical, truth there.
The Messiah.
80 grade name.
Yeah, 80 grade name. Well, the kid he's a kid. He's 17 years old, right? But you have Jeff Ponce coming out and talking about like all of the metrics, the in zone contact, the chase rate, the exit velocity, everything you love as a analytical, nerd. He is nailing at the DSL like never seen before, right? And it's like, okay, well, I can find some of that data, but we're at a disadvantage as prospectors because TrackMan isn't necessarily open to all of us. And when these organizations have TrackMan data at AA, it's like, well, it isn't out there. So you have to know somebody, or you have to find a way to pay $10,000 a month to get that aggregated data. Yeah. So we are just a lot of the time, to your point, like guessing based off the people we respect. And it's hard too, because Eldridge being so young, it's like he might have shown us some really nice exit velocities to dream on. But what if he was just hot through that short period of time where there was TrackMan data? Like seriously, it could have happened. Right. Or maybe he's putting up above average exit velocities and he's going to come up to the major leagues and just be completely overwhelmed like Jackson Holiday. It is very hard, but if I were to redraft today, you've got the Matt Shaws who are going to provide immediate impact, assuming this season because of the opportunity. And then you have the Bryce Eldridges, second half of the season.
Oblique injury for Matt Shaw, heads up.
Already?
Yeah.
Oh.
I didn't know. I saw it.
They downplayed it. I was making fun. I was making jokes yesterday. I was reading all the team news articles and finding all the dumb quotes that mean nothing, and I'm tweeting them out as if they were serious. But I did. But Mike Trout's going to try to stay healthy this year, guys. But I saw that big news update.
Well, that's big because his teammates like trying to not stay healthy. Right,
yeah,
John?
at least he's pretending to try. Yeah, that's true. Good point. But yeah, that's it. It said like I guess that's how they would play it, even if it were serious. But they said day to day, whatever, he'll be okay. But I guess oblique's a dirty word in the.
Oh, it's like elbow or shoulder soreness for a hitter. You know.
Yeah.
So John, who are some of the guys that you are either higher on or lower on this year that you're targeting in redraft?
Let me give you. I'm going to give you my secret, which I gave.
Ooh.
For if you're playing any kind of standard fantasy league, I guess this doesn't work in a points league. It's a league where your standard fantasy league is pitching wise 5 categories, 4 of them going to the starters: strikeouts, ERA, WHIP, and wins. Wins. Pretty random, right? Like hard to even, you don't worry too much about that besides the extremes like White Sox bad, Dodgers good. But ERA and WHIP, right? Those are kind of the ones you want to focus most on. What you find is that WHIP is much, much more projectable, much more steady. You don't have nearly, you'll have those years. If you look at a guy's ERA, it goes up and down, up and down. One year where he gives up a few extra 3-run homers, unlucky, or a high or a low strand rate, the ERA can go up. A lot of stuff that the pitcher didn't really control. WHIP is much more steady. So what I do is I pretty much throw out the ERA projections at least a little bit. Like I'm just kind of drafting guys that are project for good WHIPs, because if you can draft a team that projects for a great ERA very easily, that can not turn out to be true at all. You draft a team that projects for a very good WHIP, much greater chance that you actually will have drafted a good WHIP team. So draft the WHIP guys. So problem is with prospects, really hard to know how the WHIP will translate. Like Zebby Matthews would seem to be someone that projects for a good WHIP because he had a 2% walk rate or whatever it was in the minors. But we saw low. I think that turned into 5 or 6% in the majors. So that worked out. I mean, I guess while you can't translate it, I think it's fair to say that a 2% walk rate in your minor league career is going to turn into a pretty good one in the majors. Like you're probably not going to go to 11% after that. So like Zebby Matthews, I really like David Festa as well. Joey Ortiz, someone I'm targeting quite a bit. Again, not a great year last year, but seems to have both. On the hitting side, I'm targeting homers and steals. Again, like runs, RBIs, batting average, very variable. A lot of outside influences and that stuff that you don't control, which makes it a much harder thing to project accurately. Homers and steals much easier as long as you have the playing time. And so what I like to do in the later rounds is give me somebody who can do a little bit of both. And then if one fails, I can still maybe he can be worthwhile for the other thing. I don't want to put all my chips on Gerard and Encarnacion, realizing that power, right? Because if it doesn't happen or he doesn't play, whatever, bad example, but you get it. So Ortiz hits the ball hard, at least. I don't think he lifted it enough to hit a lot of home runs, and he didn't steal a lot of bases either, but he can run pretty quick, and he's going to play, like you said. He should be the shortstop, I think. Funny that this is a Brewers guy for you, but so those are kind of my general strategy points. Other young guys I put on the list here, like Tyler Soderstrom, have to kind of like his power potential, and the K rate was down last year. Short sample, but it came down to 25%. So that's actually the number you used earlier to say, like, if a guy, if he's going to strike out 25%, that's not great, but do you hit the ball hard enough and lift it enough to make me think you can make up for it with homers? And I think Soderstrom can do that. Not going to be surprising to tell anybody that I like Wyatt Langford. I don't know if I'm like as insane as Eric Cross. Have you seen what Eric Cross is saying about Wyatt Langford?
Yeah,
whatever
Doc's
Eric
on board with this. I'm not.
Whatever Eric Cross is saying, I say more.
Okay, but it just seems to me like some of you prospect guys can just like, you intentionally go over the moon about a guy just to be like, look at me, I know a prospect.
That's when it comes down to authenticity. It's like the cigar thing. It would be tough to keep smoking a cigar for a whole year every podcast if I didn't actually like cigars
all day.
Like I actually smoke a lot of cigars, and so with Langford, like he's a guy. Like, what do you think about his September stats? You think that we're looking at those too much?
I think it's typically horrible practice to split somebody's season in half and look at the second half and be like, this was great. It was great in the second half. Let's go.
It's his first year.
I know, but it's totally different with a rookie. And then there was an injury early on too. So you pretty much you have to look at it at least with a young guy because I do think that and I did a little bit of study on this. There's definitely an adjustment period, right? I don't know. Maybe you have a thought on this. How much at the beginning of a career do you forgive? Because I looked at like all the guys in the top 150 this year that debuted in the last few years. I compared their first 50 games with their career, and almost all of them had much higher strikeout rates in those first 50. So you would imagine that comes down. Churio, great example of that, 30% in the first month and a half, and then got that down almost to sub 20%, I think. Like, so yeah, I think it's worthwhile to look second half, last couple of months with young guys. Don't do that with veterans. Like, you're just shortening the sample size, and you shouldn't be doing that. Anyway, so those are the guys I kind of like. And then I saw you nodding. Do you disagree with any of that from your advanced knowledge?
Yeah, it's like basically more knowledge than anyone could ever imagine. It's just like the most. No, so yeah, Langford, pretty much you put it exactly the same way. Yeah, if it's a veteran who's in the middle of his career, then yeah, that would be unique and weird, unless he had a mitigating injury. But a kid who came out and basically had no very little minor league experience. Like, he didn't get to wear the training wheels. They threw him into the fire, and frankly, it's kind of crazy. The Rangers floundered last year, right? And he was one of their lone bright spots. What happens if the lineup around him is actually good? Because that can also be demoralizing. I'm sure it is with the Chicago White Sox. Even if you're someone who's doing okay, the rest of your team kind of mailing it in or just sucking is like, sorry, White Sox. But we know a lot of White Sox probably listen to this podcast. A lot of people on the team. Well, at least Drew Thorpe, but big Drew Thorpe guy. So when it comes to the Rangers, what happens? One of the biggest reasons I was in on Langford, because I said he doesn't even have to be a complete superstar. This is coming into last year, because I figured the rest of the team would boost his counting stats up so much. So what happens if they have a resurgence? Like, I think a lot of people believe is going to happen this year. They basically had the same team that won the World Series, except there's more going on now. And now there's more experience with Wyatt Langford, and he came on hot. So yeah, I would say the ceiling is even higher than ever before, because frankly, he's faster than I thought he'd be. He has like a 95th or higher percentile.
The tools are crazy. Yeah. All the physical stuff looks amazing. So
yeah, you helped me win a 20-man redraft.
What about Soderstrom and Ortiz?
So I watched Soderstrom here in Vegas, I want to say 2023. One of the best live ball players I've ever seen in the minor leagues. He was just phased out of AAA. Like, it was time for him to be called up, and then we saw him not be ready. And I think that's just kind of to what you said. Like, there's a gap between your minor league experience and what the major league has to offer. But what that told to me was simply, he will eventually figure this out, as long as there's not massive holes in the game that I couldn't see at the AAA level. I mean, he was the best player on the field, and I can tell you outright, he did not want to be there, still hitting home run every other day. And it's like, okay, that's kind of when we've talked to Clegg about this. Like, we don't get to a lot of minor league games, so it's hard to gauge that player, because I do think seeing a player in person really does help your evaluation of, like, how do they fit on the actual field. And then those measurables that you watch, kind of like the brain, right? Like, how is their instincts on the field? So I love Soderstrom. I just don't know when, because we don't have enough data at the major leagues to be like, oh, he is going to break out this year. Like, there are some concerns, especially with contact. And then Joey Ortiz, I think he'll have a 2020 season eventually. Like, the exit velocities were there when he was with the Orioles. Had some nice hard hits last year, but I am on, like, Joey Ortiz is a better ball player than he's a fantasy player for us.
Yeah.
And that's hard, because, like, if he plays 150 games for Milwaukee, he could easily hit 15, 17 home runs, steal 20 bags. Like, that's a great player in fantasy, as long as he can get that average a little bit up. So 2024 being his rookie season, I think this is a good year to buy. I wouldn't buy him as, like, your lock stock shortstop. I would like him to either be your middle infield, or like that first guy on the bench that you're ready to rotate in, because I think he could return great value at those draft positions.
Yeah. I think the price is right.
Soderstrom, the park. At first I thought I was maybe talking too much about this park and its impact, but now it seems like everyone's on board with that. So we'll see if it plays up the way it's supposed to play up. Then that would be a lot of fun for Soderstrom. I'm not super high on him personally, but it's very easy for me to see how it could all work out this year. And then, yeah, I mean, even a guy like Zach Geloff, who I'm really not in on, like, again, the park could only help him. Real quick, I mean, we got to wrap you up here soon, I think, John, but Yeah. Did you play? Did you play TGFBI?
I didn't this year.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Because with that, what would be the deepest redraft you play in regularly?
I do draft champions stuff. 50
Mhm.
round, 750 picks.
Okay. How many teams are in that?
15.
Yeah, it's 15-team league.
Okay.
15 round. Yeah, 50 round.
Yeah. No, I mean
Crazy.
those are. I mean, I'm not sitting here being like, you got to do 30. Man. You know, it's like no, like for redrafts especially. I mean, when you do even a 15 teamer, you can feel it. You know, because you're focusing entirely for this year.
Yeah, you learn a lot. I mean, I didn't do this stuff until a couple of years ago, and now I go way deeper than for a long time. It was just like I'm looking at the top 350 players, and that's it. And you can't do that in the big boy leagues. But so what would you say? What's the grace period you get? Like if someone drafts Matt Shaw this year, say he's healthy, and he's terrible after 50 games, or do you wait a little longer? Like, do you have a number on that of how many games to kind of forgive?
2 years.
Okay, how about a redraft league?
Well, okay, well that's hard, right? If Matt Shaw's terrible after 50 games and Christian Campbell's on the waiver wire, let's just hypothetically this is going to happen in draft champions because you draft so deep. So okay, maybe better. Caleb Durbin's on the wire. Maybe he hasn't played as much as you would have liked in Milwaukee. Maybe Bryce Terang goes down with a quad injury, and you're looking at okay, we got 6 to 8 weeks. Caleb's going to come up. Shaw's terrible. I'm probably dropping Shaw for Durbin right there because at least I know I have the speed and I have presumably
so the 50 games
average.
matter. The 50 games matter a bit to you at least. You're not totally ignoring what's happening. I mean,
it's
other than the fact that you have to, but yeah.
Like what you're spending on Shaw right now until I heard about this injury was like kind of a risky value pick because you're at least where he was being taken. It's like you really are kind of drafting him as a starter-ish, or like I said, with Joey Ortiz, first bench player off the board. That's a lot of value to give up if you're projecting a guy to suck for 50 to 70 games. But also if you invested that pick in him, you kind of have to ride it out. Like there should be somebody else to drop, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So my opinion on that would be this year, I had some success last year. I had Skeens and Langford be integral parts to my 20-man redraft win. But that said, TGFBI was train wreck. I mean, I had a bunch of I had the Langford and I had, but then Yuri Perez. That's just an injury, but Jackson Holiday obviously wasn't ready. Kobe Mayo wasn't ready.
So I went way four of those guys. Yeah, that's what
I was being a knuckle. Well, frankly, without the
TGFBI,
injuries,
who cares? That's something you do in TGFBI. It doesn't matter. But
it was my first TGFBI. I learned pretty fast that I should have gone relievers. This year I'm going relievers earlier, like to get the studs, because that's so annoying to go chase every week. I actually am really good with identifying pitchers, but I would say my big thing is post hype. So I'm chasing the value instead of the flashy. Let the other guys take the flashy rookies. I'll take the Caleb Durbin. Durbin's not going to cost you a lot. Write down if you don't know about him already. Peyton Alays, who's like kind of Caleb Durbin Jr. He's this other guy coming. He's like 5'5" in the Twins organization with similar profile. And frankly, you got to look at guys like Correa. And so his name is P-A, so like Sean Payton, P-A-Y, and then it's E-E-L-E-S. Yeah, look into this guy. Really fun story. He came out of independent ball, but you look into him, and he could be like he's going to cost you nothing. Like you can get him very late in your deeper leagues, and he might be there opening day. And again, the Twins' health risks, like Royce Lewis and Correa, and he plays second, third, short kind of deal. So I think it's someone where I can't guarantee you anything. Whereas Durbin, I feel a lot more confident with this playing time. But yeah, those are guys who I'm interested in. Real values. I mean, even Quinn Matthews, I think you can get him as like a maybe Andrew Painter goes sooner, but Quinn Matthews could be if he's not opening day.
Yeah, he's my favorite minor leaguer to pick. Actually,
cool. Okay.
How about First of all, real quick, Xavier Edwards, I'm just totally off. People think he can hit 290, and I guess he hit 330 last year. So, like, I'm like making fun. You think this guy can hit 290? Meanwhile, you just like look at what he did last year, right? But I don't like he's not going to do that again. And even the projection systems are like 280, but he doesn't hit the ball hard at all. And his expected batting average last year was like 240 or something. Like people are drafting him thinking they'll get average in steals, and I just don't think they're getting necessarily get average. Or what do you guys quickly think?
I mean, when he was in San Diego, he was, I mean, it was the same profile. I mean, back in 2018, I guess 2019 is better, 320, 2019, 336, 21, he was a 302. Like he's had a track record. Here we have 93 games, AAA 2023, 351. Like he has had the profile of an Arias his entire minor league career. He just
Line
never showed.
drives.
Yeah, he just never showed the pop. So like I'm inclined to believe he is a 290 hitter.
Okay.
It was always about playing time. Like, could he find an organization that was going to allow him to play when he was never going to hit more than 5 to 7 home runs? And
Right.
well, Miami's that team. I mean, at 423 on base percentage last year, that'll probably come down. I could see that coming down to the 390s, 380s. You know, average goes down
That's
to 2.
crazy high.
Yeah, it's. I don't have his BABIP in front of me, but
Can't like major league pitchers just stop you from hitting line drives though? I mean, not a rise.
That's a good
I guess they
point
haven't been
though.
able
Like,
to do it.
what is the approach? What is his scouting approach this season? Right? Like, how are pitchers going to go in?
Yeah,
And face
if
him?
if they know that he can't take them deep, isn't there a place they can put the pitch to be like, try to hit the side of the ballpark, but I'm not going to let you hit a line drive. But I mean, it hasn't worked for Rise or Quan. I guess those two guys have proven that this is possible.
Well,
I'm sure pitchers do everything they can to not let a Rise hit a line drive, but I don't know. It just seems like kind of a tough thing to rely on. At least, like I don't want to rely on Xavier Edwards putting up another really high line drive rate for his fantasy value, which is what you're doing when you take him.
I also think another really important aspect with a player like Xavier Edwards is when, like, if you're pitching against him, right? Okay, you have Barry Bonds behind him. The likelihood is you're going to try everything you can to get him out because you don't want him on base for Bonds.
Yeah.
Edwards has nobody behind him. So, like, that's a serious aspect that Doc brought up with, like, where is the mental aspect of the game? Like, are you as zoned in as a pitcher to get Edwards out because you're terrified of who's behind him, or because nobody's behind him? You're just kind of like, you know what? I'm going to throw a fastball in the outside corner. If he hits it, he hits it. Like, if he steals second and he steals third, I'm still going to strike the next 3 guys out anyways. So, like, that's a big aspect of, like, how does this profile play? And with Edwards not having been placed in a dangerous lineup, I actually think it benefits him because I do think pitchers are going to be more relaxed with
a great point.
That zoned in aspect of I have to get him out.
Yeah, because I don't want to believe in Xavier Edwards. It's a weird profile, but I'm just crunching the numbers right now, looking at him, and even looking at his splits as the year went on. He did come down, from a obscene on base percentage to September, October, 337 OBP, still at a 290 batting average. That's the problem, right? So like he's with a contact ability, bat to ball skills like that, you can put the ball basically anywhere in the strike zone and he'll find a way to turn it into a single probably. So yeah, and like Matt said, I think that's gonna be my new outlook going forward with Xavier Edwards, is that's crazy. Having no one behind him might help him for fantasy.
Help him. Yeah. It's such a terrible lineup.
You're not drafting him for RBIs anyway, so you just want him to get on base. But
yeah.
One more thing for me, you said you like Drew Thorpe, but I have been writing off every minor league pitcher that has a fastball under 94 miles an hour.
Would you like to
do?
So do you like Tommy John surgery for your pitchers? Because if not, it's interesting. Like we'll fetishize Greg Maddux, right? Like I see so many guys will hype up Greg Maddux. He was the number 1 guy, so smart, and then they'll never touch a guy pitching under 94. And I'm like, well,
I will say that if we were in last May and I was stuck with Griffin Canning, I would have loved him to get Tommy John surgery. I would have loved that.
Okay. That's the most controversial statement in the history of Dynasty.
Zero
Canning, I'm sorry.
0 innings would have been much better than what he did with his innings after that. But continue. I didn't let you answer my question. I'm really off the velo guys like Cade Povich and Drew Thorpe threw me off last year.
So, I mean, I'll just name a few guys like Justin Steele, Zach Gallen, Logan Webb. These guys don't get the sex factor that some of these other players. Of course, velo statistically is good in terms of fantasy stats. So you want it, but a guy like Drew Thorpe is maybe you can look at Christopher Sanchez in terms of how good a changeup can be with a 16 run value on Savant for Christopher Sanchez, and I mean even Drew Thorpe last year. Justin Steele had a really solid year. Drew Thorpe's changeup graded out better as a run value pitch than either of Justin Steele's 2 pitches, which I know he converts one into the other kind of deal. I'm not sure if you actually are familiar with that. So basically, Justin Steele has a fastball that he kind of turns into a cutter. He manipulates it into these weird. Yeah, then he's got a slider. So it's amazing. This guy with 2 pitches can make that magic happen. That just screams to me. So this is not statistic. This is pitchability, right? And so Thorpe's got this. Yeah, we'd love to see at least 1 or 2 miles an hour faster. I think that would be cool. But his changeup, they call it tunneling, right? So it tunnels off the fastball really well. And so the question is, can he bump up maybe a curveball or a slider in there just to keep batters off their game a little bit more? And he had a stretch there of about 5 or 6 games, I think it was, where he was just locking in these greasy prime Miles Michaelis kind of stats, right? Where it was like 2 or 3 runs, 6 or 7 innings.
Quality start.
Quality start, baby. And so I think that's what I'm looking for.
So what I'm learning is that I need to. So my game is talk about as many players as possible. I've reviewed 500 or something in the team previews. I did a team preview with every player covered, so I didn't have time. And then I'm doing things with a program with a Python script. So I got to rely on the stats. I don't know how to program pitchability or all this other junk, you guys, which I'm coming more and more to believe in. But I guess I'll just never get there because I'm trying to identify players with a computer script and keep things very simple. And again, I'm not even appealing to dynasty people. That is one good thing that like you mentioned, my self-awareness. I'm not going to, people ask me all the time, they DM me, should I do this trade? And they'll name 6 players I've never heard of. Should I do this dynasty trade? I was like, bro, I've heard of one of these players. Ask somebody else. So just like my thing, if I have to put in a filter into a script to say yes or no on Drew Thorpe, I'm just going to say fastball velo, no, pick somebody else, go for Quinn Matthews or something like that. But there's certainly a lot more to it.
I think the other aspect of the velo is we're now gauging, if I'm correct, velocity out of the pitcher's hand, as opposed to 90s, early 2000s, where we were gauging velo at the plate.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really interesting piece because from a data perspective, we are thinking that Drew Thorpe sits 91, 92. But if you look back on history, Drew Thorpe actually sits 90 to 89 with the old metrics. So like Doc, you brought up Greg Maddux, and it's like Greg Maddux in Drew Thorpe are more similar than you might think. It's just that Greg Maddux learned to craft the ball. Like he learned how to be a pitcher and became a Hall of Fame pitcher. Like Drew Thorpe hasn't had that same progressive linear path yet. And I think we were starting to see him learn last year.
You guys is there a disadvantage in the majors now of guys not even getting the time? Like these teams probably want instant results and they want the velo and stuff. Do they not get the time to craft that? I mean, I guess they do it in the minor leagues. But...
I was going to say, it seems like Matt's about like writing off Drew Thorpe's career after 1 month or 2, right? He was barely in the major leagues. And Justin Steele, like again, the velo is extremely similar to Drew Thorpe. And we have Justin Steele is a guy who competed for a Cy Young pretty recently. He was right in there till the very end. So
like something so few guys can do. Like him and Fried are the guys that taught me a lesson about. I used, and it is still good practice to say, don't rely on someone that got very good results on contact last year. Xwoba allowed, BABIP allowed, stuff like that. Like generally regress that towards the mean, but then you have some guys can they can control soft contact year in and year out, but it's not something anybody can do. It's a very hard thing to do apparently. So it's hard to rely on, but yeah, like Steele and Fried did show me something that I have learned in the last few years, but I don't know. I don't really want to rely on that with young players that I haven't seen a lot from.
You're probably a huge Bailey Ober guy with the whip, but what's his average fastball velo? 91, right?
Well, he's 7'9" though. So, that helps.
Well, and I would say Steele and Fried are also lefties. Like there's a big dynamic with the lefty being a more of a craftable major league pitcher within just the history of time than the right side, right? Even Jamie Moyer, like Greg Maddux was really one of the
Ober's
main notable guys that could craft from the right side because he had such an incredible cutter and circle change. Like he had the ability to drop the table off that changeup. I'm not writing Drew Thorpe off because I think to what you're saying, John, like if there's an opportunity for him to learn to craft that, it's going to be in Chicago because they're just horrible.
Right.
That's a benefit to him. But I don't think I'm going to see prime Drew Thorpe until maybe end of 2026. And that injury last year is concerning. Like it wasn't Tommy John, but if I remember correctly, it was flexor strain. That's still a major arm strain. and he's the guy that doesn't throw hard. So like, what does he look like when he comes back from that this season? It's hard to gauge.
Yeah. I gotta go, but let me
Yeah, I've
say one
seen
more
that.
thing. One more thing. All of this is good and it's fun, and I like baseball stats and like more than most things in life. But it is frustrating because like I had this experience 2 years ago. When I was a kid, you're always looking for the prospects. Like as a Pirate fan, the best parts of the year were opening day and then the trade deadline to see who we might get, you know. And then but then there's also this excitement when they called up a prospect, like a prospect pitcher. You're like, oh, it's hope, right? This guy doesn't necessarily suck, so maybe there's hope for it. So then a couple of years ago, I think 2 seasons ago, the Pirates brought up Quinn Priester, and it had a little bit of that. I was like, oh, maybe this, you know, maybe we got something here. And then I looked at the dashboard that I had, and all the stuff I wanted to see when evaluating a pitcher. I was like, oh, this isn't gonna go well. So it just like the knowledge of it and the ability that we do have to predict the future can be a real freaking buzzkill, because it just like it kills you, because you can know, for fans of bad teams, just don't look at the numbers, you know, keep your ignorance, because some of these guys you just know won't work out, and then it kind of dashes your hopes before it ever starts.
Yeah, it's funny. It's actually like Quinn Priester was a guy that I liked as well, but like dynasty prospect industry hated him coming up, hated him. Like just was always banging the drum. This guy's never going to be any good. And it was like, no, I think he'll be okay. And to your point, like now he's in Boston for a reason. John, where can the listeners find you? Where can they subscribe to your Substack?
If you search MLB Data Warehouse or JONPGH on Twitter, PGH means Pittsburgh, and I don't live there anymore, but I'm not going to change it. JONPGH and then MLB Data Warehouse on Substack. A lot going on, and the daily notes, daily projections, and stuff are super unique. I do a lot of unique stuff, but do it all by myself, so I don't have a lot of the resources other websites do. But yeah, that's me. I appreciate having you guys on. That was a lot of fun. Stayed longer than I wanted to, but I would love to talk more. I learned a lot, and I do need to. I think eventually, you know, you got 3 kids, you live in Indiana, you spend a lot of time inside. I don't live a life where I'm traveling the globe and stuff. So I think eventually I'll be suckered into some dynasty leagues, and then I'll need your help.
We'll be here for help. Absolutely. No, John, it was awesome. Thank you for coming on today. We definitely appreciate the approach. Doc, take us out.
I'm your Huckleberry.
See you guys next week.